Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 18 Strong podcast. We have another live interview today with a very, very special guest. One of the guys that I've looked up to in the world of broadcasting, now in the podcast game, and probably the most prolific sports announcer that is out there these days, and fellow St. Louisan, Mr. Joe Buck. Joe, welcome to the 18 Strong podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's kind of funny. I plan my days now around podcasts, not just my own, but trying to. Now that I do my own podcast, I understand what it's like to try to get guests. So I'm kind of going. I'm becoming 9-to-5er, which I never thought I would be, sitting at my desk and being responsible here in my own home. So here we are, and I'm happy to be with you to talk about my favorite topic, which is golf.
I love it. I tell many of my friends who I've reached out to get interview guests from that sometimes having a podcast, being a host, is kind of like being an insurance salesman, trying to get all of your friends to invite their friends onto to your show. So now I know you can appreciate that. So we were just kind of talking before we started the recording about your golf game. Sounds like you haven't played a whole lot, but you've made some swing changes, and sounds like you're excited for the upcoming season.
Yeah, I am. I think I'm just excited, like everybody else, to try to start to inch our way back toward life as we knew it. And to me, that is a lot of golf during the week. Now, my wife and I have twin 2-year-old boys. So I have older daughters that are 23 and 20. And I've gotten that look from a wife, whether it was their mom or my current one, when you walk in after a full day of golf and, you're exhilarated, you're tired, you're whatever. And then it's like, okay, now it's baby time. And so I can't act like I'm going to play as much as I played when I got my handicap, to its lowest point. But yeah, this has been kind of a time that I've looked for reasons to get outside and get a little bit of air, and that air has combined with, thankfully, here in St. Louis, still being able to hit balls and going over to St. Louis Country Club, which I just got in last year, and they've kept the range open, the practice green open. So working a lot on that has led to some swing changes that I've been putting off for a long time, and now I think this has been the time to implement them, and we'll see if I can carry it out onto the golf course. But I'm excited to get back out there and compete against my friends and my non-friends.
You said that you're making some serious changes. What are they, and what was it that was kind of holding you back from committing to make those before?
I think probably just intimidation of, I think when you get your handicap low enough, and trust me, I think the quickest way to put somebody to sleep is to act like anybody else cares about your round of golf, right, or whatever swing changes you're putting in. But I think I've always struggled with the idea of keeping the club in front of me. And what I've always thought was in front of me has really kind of been stuck behind me. And so I think the top end teachers that I've worked with, whether it's been Hank Haney, Eric Kaplan down in Florida, I've taken lessons from really, I think anybody walking the range, like the guy picking the range, he'll give me a lesson if I let him near enough to me. So, and I tend to take everybody's advice, and then you're just kind of swimming in information. And I think I was kind of faking my chest turn, really not getting behind the ball. And when I did, I would also get the club way behind me. So I think it's been more kind of working on almost cupping my left wrist at address, which sounds bad, but getting the shaft working more up instead of around. For a while, I went to kind of a one-plane swing, and I was trying to take pressure off my back. I've had 2 back surgeries, but I never really got to a one-plane swing. My handicap got down to like a 2.
Wow.
But I just wasn't consistent. And I think getting the shaft working a little bit more up and down and keeping it in front of me instead of diving way behind me is kind of the key for me taking the next step. So we'll see. But on the range, it's been finally powerful again. I just had lost my power, and I lost my ability. I was putting a lot of effort in and not getting a lot out of, distance-wise or out of the ball or out of the hit. And now I feel like I'm getting that again, which I used to have, then I lost for a long time, and now I'm back.
So you said that golf is one of your favorite topics, obviously announcing and everything, but you obviously love playing the game. Is this something that you grew up playing and loved, or when did you catch the bug and really dive deep?
Yeah, I did not grow up playing. My mom and dad did not belong to country clubs. We were at Algonquin for a little while, and maybe I played a handful of rounds there as a little kid, but I was never into it. I was never very good. I was more of a baseball player, football player as a kid, basketball player. But golf, I think, kind of came into my life when I was broadcasting in AAA in the minor leagues, and you'd be. It takes somebody to introduce you to the fun of spending your day when you do what I was doing, and I do less of now, but kind of the night after night of baseball broadcasting. Even at AAA, we'd be in Buffalo and we'd go play, or we'd be in Omaha and we'd go play. And I started to get it. I always wondered, why is my dad and Mike Shannon, why are they getting up at the crack of dawn to go play golf? But it's just so wonderful. And you don't have to be at work until 4 or 5 o'clock at night. So it makes for long days. But yeah, I think then going into the big leagues, and Mike Shannon could set up a golf tour that would make Jay Monahan blush, because we'd be at Olympic in San Francisco, Medina in Chicago. Playing these venues like right before they're having U.S. Opens, and even some members are having a difficult time getting on. And a bag of autographed balls and long-term connections would get you on anywhere. And that's when I really caught it. I think Mike Shannon probably made me a golf nut, and I've been challenged with trying to get better at it. I dream about it. I write notes about it. I study it really pretty much every day I'm walking the planet.
What would you say is your ideal round of golf? Like, is it walking? Is it playing music? Or is it more competitive? Are you a grinder?
Oh, I'm a grinder.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it impedes me to some degree. I think loosening up and caring less would probably benefit me. If you talk to my buddy Mark Miller, who's my teacher I referenced earlier down in Texas, I think he would tell you that I'm a little bit too intense, and I try to be perfect on the air, and I try to be perfect on the golf course, and that just doesn't happen. You can't be perfect on the golf course. But I'm a walker, definitely. I'm with my 2 back surgeries. It's been a challenge during these quarantine times of not having carts and carrying my own bag. I'm a snob, obviously, but I also like to pay young guys and give them some money. And I've developed great relationships. Some of my caddies have become my best friends. Kyle Sesniak, who's been a Nike rep forever, was my longtime caddy at Old Warson. Now his little brother Kevin is my caddy, and you really get to. I like to mentor people when I'm out there. I like to help them out, or we joke around, or if they're of age, if I grab a beer at the turn, I grab them a beer at the turn, and we have fun with my caddy. That's a big part of it. But yeah, I think it's late day, like a 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock tee time, walking with my buddies, not really in a match, but in like a NASA or something where we're talking trash the whole time. And it gets fun, but it gets intense, but it's the right kind of intense. Like I got to the club championship finals last year, literally 3-putted my way around for 36 holes. I think I 3-putted the first 18 holes 11 times. And it was match play. I got to the 36th hole. That's how well I hit it and how poorly I putted. And it's all because I want it too bad. I'm grinding too hard, and I just get in my own way when you've got more of a touch, like with a putt going. So I would say buddies, late day, beers or drinks, music. Yeah, if you can, on somebody's bag, and just enjoying the walk.
Do you get a chance to play much with the broadcast team from Fox, for the golf broadcast team, Shane and Brad and those guys, Paul Azinger?
Yeah, we played a lot early. We've been doing it. It's hard to believe, but we've been doing it now since 15. So, we've been doing it for 5 years. And when we first went out there, man, I drag Faxon out there every chance I got. And McCarron, who's just awesome and obviously a hell of a player and can bomb it. And, going through his swing thoughts. And I'm always fascinated at people's thoughts right off the ball. Like that to me, that first chunk of time and space is what I really want to get inside. Like I want to know what Fax's first thought is off the ball, or Scott's first thought is off the ball. Fleshy would hit with us a little bit. Paul did not. Paul doesn't play a lot. Now he's told me recently he's gone back to playing. I think he kind of lost his love for playing when maybe he had to work at it harder than he ever had to, and he wasn't as good as he was used to being, and he just kind of chucked it. But I play a lot with Smoltz. I probably play more with Smoltz, my baseball partner, during October if we're in a warm weather city than any of my broadcast partners. I just love it. If I can get out, I'm willing to get up at 6 in the morning and do a World Series game at 8 that night, if it means that I can get out and walk around and have fun and enjoy the whole, experience of broadcasting baseball in October too.
Being able to play with some of those guys, especially like a Brad Faxon, and you saying that you love taking lessons and getting tips from people, what's maybe one great tip that Brad Faxon has given you over the years, or is there any wisdom that he's enlightened upon you?
Yeah, I mean, my God, if you're an absolute moron if you don't go to Fax and ask about putting. I'm not going to ask him about hitting drivers. I've asked Smoltz more about hitting drivers than I have about Brad. But I mean, Brad is such a wizard, and you play with him, and it's never. He's one of those guys that can shoot par, couple under, whatever, and it never looks hard. And it's really kind of the same with Smoltz. I mean, he's always hovering right around par, just under. But it was facts, he notices things right away. And I think he has to protect or guard against giving me too much if we're actually in a round, because we're really not on the practice green very often. But I was too narrow, and just everything was tight. And he's like, get your elbows out a little bit, spread your feet out a little bit, get a better look at the ball and get a better kind of stable feel through it. And that paid off immediately. But at the same time, when I'm out with them, I'm also respectful that they're getting out probably too for a rare time. And I don't want to turn it into, walking lessons with the pro. I want them to enjoy it too. So I'll ask them a couple things and, bunker shots or chipping or whatever it might be. But I try to leave them alone too and let them just be, out playing golf as well, because they deserve that break too.
When you got into the broadcasting of golf side of things, after so many years of doing football, baseball, what was the most difficult piece or challenge stepping into the world of golf compared to what you had really, done so well for so many years?
It was way more difficult than I thought. I did with Greg Norman kind of a practice broadcast in 2014 when the Open was at Pinehurst and the U.S. Open. And so we were in a trailer, and realizing how fast it is. When you're at home, I never understood when my dad was an older man and I was there, and why he loved Sundays laying on the couch watching golf. And he was just like, someday you'll get it. Someday you'll get it. Now, with kids flying all over me and whatever, the idea of, a Sunday at Augusta or a Sunday at some unbelievable venue, Pebble, you just take it all in, and you might doze off, or you might be, but I'm too into everybody's swing. I'm like rewinding and trying to look at angles and, where the club head is in the back of their swing or whatever. But it's so fast, and you would think it would be the opposite. But if I do a Super Bowl or I do a World Series or just a regular game, I've got the best seat in the house, and I'm looking at everything out in front of me. And obviously in golf, it's the opposite. I'm sitting at a studio desk. I've got monitors all in front of me, but the golf course is behind me. And I never turn around and look at the golf course. And because stuff's going too much, you got too many guys going. You got 156 guys going at least at the start. And I'm only on a sliver of, in some cases, a couple 300 acres of playing field. So I'm reliant on looking at a monitor, getting information in my head. I'm not there. So if the producer says, hey, let's go to Spieth at 5 putting for birdie, I have to I have to hope that the next guy to pop up on the screen is Spieth. I got to hope that he's at 5 because he's standing on green grass. Most of it's green grass all over the place, and that he's actually putting for birdie. And then the minute that ball either goes in or doesn't, boom, you're off to the next guy and the next hole, and then he's got a story. So it's a challenge. I think we've finally gotten to a comfortable place with how the choreography works and where Paul fits, where Greg used to fit, where the whole announcers go, and then the guys on the ground walking. I mean, nobody's next to each other, so you have to have a pretty rigid set of rules that you have to follow, or otherwise everybody would be talking all over each other. So there's a lot more production in golf than there is in any other thing I've ever done.
What about the prep work of it? Obviously, you've got so many golfers that are going to be out there in the weekend. How much do you try to get to know them ahead of time and know them and their stats compared to maybe baseball or football, especially maybe football, where it's like week to week you have a little bit more time to prepare and you're going to have these two teams?
Yeah, I think for baseball and football, you can kind of follow these stories and the ups and downs of a season that by the time you get to the postseason, pretty much everybody knows where these teams come from. Now, you also, when you get to a World Series or a Super Bowl, you're bringing new people under the tent. And so if you've got the Washington Nationals like we had last year, you have to talk about I mean, they were dead in the water. They were looking to fire the manager. And then all of a sudden, when did it turn around and how did it turn around? So there's more big themes there. And for golf, yeah, you're right. I mean, everybody's got a story. Everybody's got stats that they're proud of. I think you have to find one or two stats that are relevant, like Jordan Spieth's putting and seeing where that's kind of gone over the years, or driving accuracy of a Dustin Johnson or a Rory McIlroy, or however, there are certain stats for certain people that are really telling, that'll tell you why they're succeeding or failing. And then, I've got a rundown each Monday of what's happened the previous weekend in golf. And I read that, I highlight it. And before I walk into a US Open, I've gone back over the whole year. I've looked at everybody's success and failure. I've kind of tracked where the season's gone so that once we get to mid-June, now you know who's hot, who's not. Maybe there's been changes at the top of the world ranking, whatever it might be. And then you just kind of let it unfold. And as it pares itself down, now you can really get into not just the stats for the season, but the stats for the week. Why is Dustin Johnson at Oakmont, sitting on a lead? Well, he's first in sand saves, or he's whatever it is. The stats then become really relevant by the time you get to Sunday. But that you can't drown in information where you're then not watching what's happening in front of you. I think you have to do it. You do the work. But then you have to turn your attention to today and what's on the screen and evaluate that and set up the people you're working with and let them tell you why somebody just made a great shot or somebody missed an opportunity.
Being out there, being able to see these guys in person, and obviously you getting to play with some of these guys and the guys that you see on a regular basis, what do you see as some of the biggest differences, kind of the wow factor of them versus, being out at maybe Old Warson or St. Louis Country Club on a Sunday, seeing the rest of us playing?
Well, I think just the audio. There's audio when club face meets ball with these guys. It just doesn't sound like anything I hear at my extremely amateur rank. You see a consistency. You see. I think you see a dedication to dialing in everything to specifics that the rest of it I can't. If there's wind and it's 124-yard shot, am I hitting my gap wedge, or is the wind quartering and now I'm going to take a little bit off my pitching wedge? I mean, these guys are so locked into what those numbers are. There's Bryson DeChambeau, who's at the very top of that food chain, but they're all down to the yard or the half yard. So I think it's audio, walking the range, getting to know these guys, realizing, by the way, that they do hit bad shots. It's not all flush city where they're striping it down the fairway after fairway after fairway. That's what my buddy Jay Delsing taught me early. He said, you've been watching these guys on TV your whole life, and most of the time on TV they're showing unbelievable shots. That's why those shots are on TV. But there are also some crappy shots that these guys are hitting, and don't make the mistake to think that it's just fairways and greens, or it just doesn't work that way, even for them. But I think it's the audio. It's the crispness of club face meeting the ball, and I don't feel it myself all the time, and I sure as hell don't see that walking the range at Old Warson, St. Louis, Norwood, wherever.
With all the people that you've played with, who would you say is the best non-professional golfer that you've played with? Is that Smoltz?
Yeah, but I mean, he's had enough exemptions and time now on a Champions Tour where I could make the case that maybe he doesn't even qualify. Marty Fish, who I play with out at Bel Air, is a hell of. I mean, he's as good a player, but he's also kind of 1 foot into the professional ranks. I love playing with the hockey guys. I mean, I actually beat Brett Hull last year on my way in the club championship. So that was kind of a big feather in my cap because those guys just have that natural kind of side-on game where it's just hand-eye and the ability to just kind of take it back and flush it. So I think a lot of the hockey guys, I've had a chance to play with Freddie Couples, who's just a joy to play with and watch. Pat Perez is one of my closest friends, period, let alone on tour. And watching him, I mean, I can make the case that nobody hits the ball better than Pat Perez, even right now. But he just doesn't have the length. And it's unfortunate for him. And sometimes, as we all know, he gets a little bit hot under the collar. But I think of the non-professional guys. Timberlake I played with is a hell of a player and a grinder to extreme. But I would say probably Brett Hall is a guy that I think consistently every day is going to hover right around par and make it look pretty easy.
How did you and Pat Perez become so close? I read your book, and you talk about him a lot in your book and your relationship there.
It's a place down in Cabo, El Dorado. I got to know him at a couple of events. I mean, he's one of the nationally funniest guys I've ever met in my life. It's funny to see him. I've seen him down there around Spieth and around Justin Thomas and around Smiley Kaufman, and they kind of all trail around him like little puppy dogs because he's the one guy that will say anything to anybody. And I've seen it. He can be a little biting and cutting at times, but somehow he gets away with it. If I said the stuff he said, I'd get punched in the mouth. But he and I have hung out, and I've found him to be exactly the opposite of what you would think publicly. I've seen a guy, obviously, that gets mad and is, fighting himself to not throw his putter 6 times around. And then as a person, he's got a huge heart. He really cares. He's a dedicated husband. He loves his little girl. And it's fun to text him during the course of the season and kind of get his thoughts on what's going on tour and how he's feeling and, his relationship with Parsons and PXG. I mean, his stories are phenomenal. So it's almost like he could be Don Rickles Jr., the way he gives trouble to people. And I don't know, I just like being around him. So it's a Cabo-driven relationship, and I've had him down there at different events as my partner. And he stayed with me. His wife stayed with me. He's fun to be around.
Are we going to see him on a Daddy Issues episode anytime in the near future?
Yeah, I told him. He sent me that. I said, you're going to have to win an event or something. I mean, you got to
you got to earn it.
You got to earn it. You don't just show up because you're my friend. I mean, I got a lot of friends. You're going to have to. He would be great. And I've done his show. His radio show on PGA Tour Radio, and it's fun because he will say it like it is, and he'll give me trouble, and I can give him trouble right back. So he can definitely take it. He can dish it out as well as anybody I've ever been around, but he can take it too and roll with it, which is what I think is so endearing and why people like him so much.
Yeah, he just seems like he has just a realness to him that people love. I saw him on the Faraday Show and just kind of got to get a different side of him, and it was really cool to see him and hear his story. Speaking of daddy issues, what brought on the podcast? What made you and Oliver Hudson decide that during quarantine times you were going to start a new show called Daddy Issues?
Yeah, I can honestly say we had this whole plan in place prior to quarantine. It just worked out that during quarantine, it's, as you know, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, at least with regard to podcasting. I mean, I realize everything comes with a disclaimer that there are people, loved ones, fighting for, to get through this terrible virus. So that goes without saying. But I think the difficult thing is, when I've listened to podcasts, I've listened to them in transit. I've listened to them on an airplane. I've listened to them on a train. I've listened to them, when I land in a city and I'm driving from the airport in. It's kind of comforting to me. But nobody's really doing that right now. So you're asking people to be at home and carve out time to listen to a podcast. So that's part one. The positive is everybody's kind of at home. So if you have a chance to, tap a Mark Cuban on the shoulder and ask him to come on, or A-Rod or David Spade or Joel McHale, or we have Nikki Glazer tomorrow, Josh Duhamel, it's been fun there's the through line of daddy issues. Like I'm always going to be in my dad's shadow in this city. And thank God he was my best friend and he and I were as close as we were, because he set out a hell of an example. And for sure in St. Louis, it's really hard to live up to all that he did, not just on the air, but off the air. For Ali, he's been on sitcoms. He's been on Rules of Engagement. He's been on a show called Splitting Up Together on ABC. He's been an accomplished actor, and most people would take that and be really proud, but he's not, because he's Kate Hudson's brother. He's Goldie Hawn's son. Kurt Russell he calls dad. Wyatt Russell is his brother. So he feels like he's the black sheep of the family, and he's got daddy issues. And his dad left him when he was 10 or 11 years old. So having this kind of through line, people have daddy issues no matter what. It could be great. It could be not so great. And if they don't have them going up the ladder in the family tree, they might have them now because they're daddies themselves. So when we talked to our first female, and we're psyched to have a female on, Nikki Glazer, who's a comedian, tomorrow, and talk to her about her dad and how close she is to her father, which I see following her on Instagram during this time. She's been back in St. Louis, went to Kirkwood High School, and is just totally into being with her parents. And a big part of that is her relationship with her dad. So that's been the fun part, to have a kind of destination of where you want to go with the questions and then see how people react.
It's been really cool to hear the different interviews, and like Mark Cuban, A-Rod. I love the A-Rod interview. It was cool to hear him talk about his family and just life now, and how different it was. Just the impression that I always had of him when he was playing ball always seemed like he was very buttoned up. You even talked about how, when you're on the air, you want to be perfect. You want to have all these, the hair's got to be perfect. The everything you say has to be perfect. But he just seems so relaxed and carefree. And hearing him talk about his kids and him growing up and playing and watching baseball and things, it's been really neat to hear all the different guests that you've had on the show. What have you found has been the most gratifying takeaway from you, as far as you being a new dad again and just learning from all these other people?
Yeah, I think what you realize, and what I realized when I did a show on DirecTV called, it was on Audience Network, called Undeniable, is it doesn't matter who you have sitting in that other chair. We all look at them as perfect, whether it's Derek Jeter or, Aikman, or it's Michael Phelps, or it's Kelly Slater, or, everybody from all these different sports that are Hall of Famers. And everybody's been through stuff. Everybody's been through stuff personally. Everybody's been through stuff professionally. Nobody's led a perfect life. Everybody's made mistakes, whether it's Michael Phelps, breaking down, talking about going through rehab and the bong picture and how that got out. And he knew the person that put that out to the public. And his lawyer said, we're going to bury this kid. And he said, don't even mention his name. Let's just let karma take care of that. Just seeing people's insecurities too. And I think that's kind of, when you ask about having kids again, nobody's a perfect dad. We're all trying to do our best. It's been said a billion times, but there is no manual, and you're trying to make the right steps. You're trying to give the right advice. You're trying to help the right amount with homework without being a helicopter parent. You're trying to get your kids involved in sports without driving them crazy. You're trying, whatever it is. We're all just finding our way. Some, I guess, it comes easier than others. But I do believe that if you give it a full, fair, honest effort, your kids will know it. And you're putting stuff in when they're, in the case of my boys, 2, that they know they're protected. Whatever that sense is to a 2-year-old, they know that they're protected, and they know that they've got a mom and a dad. And not everybody has that will do whatever they can to protect them. And that comfort, I think, allows people to kind of grow and thrive. And so however you have to do it, I think that's the number one thing. Don't be lazy. Give it a real effort, and you'll be rewarded, as I have been with my daughters who are 23 and 20, and I count them as my 2 best friends in the world, and I think they would say the same about me.
The book that you wrote a couple of years ago, what made you decide to write that and really put yourself out there, kind of along the lines of what we were just talking about? Nobody's perfect. Everybody's got these things that, from the TV standpoint or from the outside, you want people to see yourself as perfect. But what made you decide to open it up, let the readers listen and get to know you more? And what's been the response after the book?
Yeah, that was, I'm so glad I did it. I think of all the things, other than getting married again to my wife, Michelle, and I truly mean that. I think the second best thing I did was write that book. And like I told the publisher when I wrote it, and I don't think the agent from CAA wanted me to say it, but I meant it. If one person buys this book, or 1 billion people buy this book, I really don't care. I just want to write it. I want to get it out there. Everybody's got a perception of who they think I am. Being the national guy and having done 22 World Series in the last 20 in a row, I'm the first guy and the only guy that's done National Baseball World Series during the age of social media. And when you show up as the national guy, and you don't care who wins, that's not part of my job description. And if the Astros play the Dodgers, it does not affect me one way or the other. And I get it when people go, "Oh, you're from St. Louis. You're a big." Every other city thinks all I do is root for the Cardinals. People in St. Louis think I don't root for the Cardinals enough. But that's not. I can't go into that trap. But that's it. It's everybody thinking they have a real good handle on who and what I am and what I care about, and if I have a sense of humor, if I'm a stiff, if I'm a jerk, or if I feel like I work pretty hard, and so I said I'm just going to put this out there for the record, so to speak, and at least people have more information between me saying ball 1, strike 2, touchdown, and trying to read inflection in my voice and excitement, and you're more excited for them than you are for me. That gets tiring. And so that's why I did it. And man, like I said, I couldn't dream of it having worked out better, because I think it's kind of turned the tide a little bit with people understanding me a little more. And then doing these quarantine calls during this whole coronavirus pandemic, and being engaged on social media in an absolutely new way, and it all being positive and fun, and that was enlightening too. So it's been a good couple of years along those lines, and I don't know why it would trend backward. I think it's progressing the way I kind of hoped it would.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like it's just kind of let you almost just shed some of the skin and let yourself out there quite a bit more, because people now have seen like, hey, I'm not this buttoned up guy that everybody thought that I was, or this is me. I'm a real dude.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think it probably leads to things that either A, people wouldn't have expected, or even accepted me doing, like being on Brockmire and saying some of the stuff that I say to Hank Azaria's character, Jim Brockmire, which is an IFC show, or doing the podcast and talking about my wife and talking about topics that would never come up on a Sunday or a Saturday or in an October playoff game or whatever. But that's the stuff that I enjoy talking about, and I enjoy kind of sparring with somebody in the case of Oliver or a guest, sparring mentally and trying to make them laugh or having them make me laugh and just being a normal human being and kind of just being myself as opposed to what I really have to be for self-preservation on national broadcasts on Fox.
What's the well, I was just listening to the podcast recently where you talked about kind of an interesting proposition that you got for announcing during these COVID times that you had to turn down. I think thankfully, probably a little bit too much of revealing yourself if you would do that.
Yeah. Some porn site wanted me to call play-by-play on live webcams or whatever. And I mean, obviously you don't even entertain it, but it's funny to read and it's funny to talk about or tweet about or whatever. And again, I don't know that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, if that offer came my way on Twitter, I would have just I would have read it and all that, but I think publicly I would have ignored it. Now I turned it around and made a joke, and then that kind of went everywhere. And I've talked about it on shows, and it's funny. I mean, there's 100 reasons why I wouldn't do it. There's not one reason why I would. And so it was kind of a publicity stunt by whatever the site was. I still don't even know the name of the site. And they got what they wanted. They got me talking about them, and they got their 15 minutes, and then you just move on in life. But it's fun. I mean, I don't take myself seriously. And I think that's been the best thing about being my dad's son is I saw a Hall of Fame announcer, but I saw a Hall of Fame person. I saw somebody that treated people well, that didn't do a game acting as if he thought people were tuning in to hear him. He knew that people were tuning in to hear their team play. In the case of St. Louis, the Cardinals. So that was the best. He didn't take himself like, I'm the announcer, I'm the broadcaster for the St. Louis Cardinals. It was kind of a means to an end where he raised money for cystic fibrosis. He raised money for Parkinson's later in life. He raised money for, everybody that came knocking. And that just was the best example to just realize that being the broadcaster is not that important. And so act accordingly.
Being a St. Louis guy myself, and obviously listening to your dad growing up calling the Cardinals games, listening to you growing up calling the Cardinals games, is there one or two either habits or lessons that you getting to watch your dad and learn from your dad growing up and being in the box with him and going to the baseball games with him, traveling all over, one habit or lesson that has really stuck with you that he instilled, you watch him do, and you have taken that into your broadcast career?
Yeah, I think literally everything. It would be hard to pick out one or two things because realize I grew up in the old Busch Stadium. Every night I was in the broadcast booth. So it was the engineer on the far left, my dad, Mike Shannon, for a while, a guy named Bob Starr was there too, and then me. And I sat down at the end and I had a little, like half a headset, a can earpiece that I would put in, and I was watching the game out in front of me, and I could turn 15 degrees to my left and watch my dad and Mike do the broadcast. It was like a master's class every night of my life. So even if it's not, here's how I would call a home run, it's more like the rhythm and the pacing and what's important, what's not important. And maybe some of that stuff becomes dinosaur land here when we're talking about analytics and WAR and some of these other new stats that I feel like if you need Pythagoras to come back from the dead and explain how these statistics are put together by people way smarter than me, on a broadcast when somebody's sitting at the plate, that's just not for me. Like that's not. I think you can go there a little bit, but to assume that everybody's consumed with somebody Mike Trout's WAR number, it's just not a dynamic number. It's not a number that you go, oh my God, his WAR number is 8. Okay, awesome. Well, what's a bad one? You know, once you have to do all these qualifiers, but that's how I learned, and I'm fast realizing that the game I saw as a kid is a lot different than the game I broadcast now as a 51-year-old, and you know, someday it'll be time for somebody else to come in and give you all that stuff, and you know, we'll see where it goes. But to answer your question, I think everything I do I took from my dad, and you know, not getting on players, not getting on umpires, I think was something that he was really proud of, and I've tried to carry forward myself.
Joe, you seem like you're a guy who doesn't like to brag about his accomplishments, doesn't like to really kind of put yourself in the limelight. But what's something that we don't see that you do? Everybody that I've talked to that knows you personally tells me how hard you work, how incredibly diligent you are in the research that you do. What's something that we don't see, maybe a habit that you have on a daily basis or a ritual that you keep that is one that has really helped you become as successful as you are?
Well, I don't know that it's any different than really anybody you could talk to. I think that I'm really responsible when it comes to my work and what I need to prepare myself to be my most relaxed. That's what I tell kids all the time that want to get into broadcasting. Do your work, do the research. You know, I don't go to bed unless I've read every clip. If I've got the Packers and 49ers coming up this Sunday, I don't go to bed Monday night without reading all of the articles about the Packers and the 49ers that Monday. And then it's that Tuesday. And then I put this big board together, and I've got every name, number, stat, everything that's important to me is all on there. But I think the main thing is doing all that work, doing it yourself. You know, some guys farm it out to other people to do and pay them because they don't want to bother putting all that information in. I don't like doing that because if I'm going to make a mistake, I want it to be my mistake. I learned that with the Brooks Koepka girlfriend thing. I mean, that wasn't my note. That came from a card from the back of the booth that, you know, I'd never met Brooks. Actually, I had met Brooks Koepka, but I sure as hell didn't know who he was dating. And I get this card, and it's like, so this guy's mistake becomes my mistake because I read it live on air. I don't ever want that again. I really hadn't had to deal with that before because I sleep a lot better if I know that I made the mistake, it's on me. But you know, I don't trust other people's work. So I do all the stuff. But then if a big stiff wind comes up before the game starts and blows all that out of the booth, I should still be able to do the game. And that's from putting the work in, but not relying on it. I have to have my head up. I have to watch what's happening, and I have to react. And if I do the preparation, then I can fully be myself on the air, and that's when it is really fun.
What do you see happening with everything going on now? Are we going to be able to get back to sports the way that we had been before? How long do you see this taking, and what's kind of your prediction?
I fully believe this. Anybody who answers this question as if they know is lying, because nobody knows. Nobody knows that if and when they open these hockey training camps or these NBA training camps or NFL training camp or back to spring training part 2, if 4 people on a team get coronavirus, you know, what does that do? Does that shut down that team? Does that shut down? Do you have to wait 2 more weeks and then people are going to get infected? It's just, I think, a question, at least in my mind, how serious does the issue become throughout the league? And if it becomes really serious where you're, you know, night before the game and Patrick Mahomes gets tested and he's positive, I mean, he can't play, right? So, you know, now you don't have Patrick Mahomes in a game. I don't think anybody knows the answer to this question. And so I'll just wait. I fully believe they're going to all try. Baseball wants to get rolling in June for a July 1 or first week of July opening. No all-star game, maybe extra teams in the playoffs. 80 or so games, more if they can, and then we'll see. But it is so tiring by now to hear this, but the virus will tell you when we can go back to life as we know it. To me, of all the sports out there, golf's the easiest, with social distancing, with two people basically going at it with player and caddy. I'm talking about you can stay away from your opponent or the others in your grouping and go play. And these guys are ready to go play right now.
Yeah.
Different with the other sports.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to get some golf back on TV for sure. I think we're all craving any kind of sport, and hopefully this Tiger Phil thing and the Ricky and DJ thing, that'll kind of quench our appetite a little bit. Joe, I got a couple last quick questions for you just before we close out the show here, if you're ready for them.
Sure.
All right. Are you a Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore guy?
Caddyshack, not even close.
What would your walk-up song be to the first tee box if you could pick one?
Well, if you're saying it, if there's a walk-up song and I'm in, that means that there's kind of an event and I'm about to tee it in front of a bunch of people, it would probably be Jack White's I'm Shakin', because I have found myself in different events kind of like, are these my arms? Are these my legs? Am I going to be able to even tee the ball up, let alone hit it? So I'm going, I'm shaking.
Yeah, imagine walking up to the first tee of a Ryder Cup and what that would be like.
Yeah, I just don't know how you pull the club back. But that's what they do, and people will go, you do what you do, he or she does what he or she does, and that's just, they're used to that by now, and they've been doing that their whole lives. So it's just, when it's foreign to you, that's when it's just intimidating beyond belief.
If you could play one round of golf with anyone in the world, this could be past or present, who would it be and where would you play?
I still think my number one course that I've ever played is Cyprus. I just can't find anything to beat it. And I've been lucky enough to play a lot of the top 10, top 100 courses. I would go with my friends. I mean, I wouldn't say I want to play with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson and Sam Snead. Or Jack Nicklaus, right? I would go with my group. I'd go with the people I play with and who I have the most fun with. So I'd take my friend Harry Freeman from St. Louis, my friend Bill Rowe from St. Louis, and I would throw in my buddy. Kelly James, who's a great entertainer, loves to play golf, and goes to all these corporate events. He's great. I would make Pat Perez caddy for me, just to have his sense of humor around me.
That would be awesome. Joe, I can't thank you enough for all your time today. Any last piece of advice for all the 18 strong golfers out there trying to grind it out just like you?
Remember to have fun. I mean, I'm so tired of being frustrated. If I get the time off to actually go play, how dare I come home frustrated? But God, every time I come home, I'm frustrated because I left it out there. Just, either safely have another drink, smoke a cigar, relax. Nobody's winning the U.S. Open in your group, so just chill.
Joe, where's the best place for people to go follow along with you and everything you have going on?
I think I would direct everybody to my podcast too. Daddy Issues. It's on, wherever you can find podcasts, including iTunes and whatever. But I think that's where you will get to know me best. Obviously, you'll see me on all these games, but if you want to get to know, I guess, who I really am, I think that podcast is probably right now the best thing I've got going on.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you again for everything, and thank you just for representing St. Louis the way that you do. We're all very proud of you here, obviously, and like I said, I've been listening to you for so many years and appreciate everything that you're doing, and you've been a big inspiration to me here at 18 Strong, and love that you love golf and everything you're doing for the game.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I appreciate it, and best of luck to you. Let's all stay healthy and get back out there being together and having fun with this great game.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the 18 Strong podcast. We'll catch up with you again next week. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.